what do you think? Like first thing on the top of your mind, go ahead and raise your hand.
Poison.
All right, toxic, poison.
Smurfs.
What is it?
Smurfs.
Smurfs, yep. Okay. Yep.
I think I'm a poster I had back in high school.
Okay. Trippy poster in high school, right? Yep. Cool.
My mind kind of goes to Alice in Wonderland.
Yep.
David the Gnome, the old cartoon. I thought.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So a lot of, there's a lot of fear around this mushroom. There's a lot of mythology and misinformation too. So I'd like to talk a lot about, as much as I can with each of these areas and shed some light on, the nuances of this mushroom, because it can be toxic. It can be, what we would call poisonous. And it also is linked to ancient traditions and also mythology. So it's all of the above. And a lot of it too is how you prepare it, how you work with it, where you're at, where you're coming from when you're working with this mushroom. I love Amanita because one of the reasons is because it's really like the symbol of occultism. Occultism is esoteric knowledge hidden in plain sight. So when you look at the dollar bill, you have the all-seeing eye, and you have all these cryptic symbolisms and like everything in our modern world. But Amanita is this natural thing, this natural phenomena that grows on every continent. It grows in every part of the world, and it is filled with a lot of different theories and misinformation, around Santa Claus. It's everywhere. It's in your phone. It's your mushroom emoji. Is Super Mario mushroom, Alice in Wonderland, Santa Claus. It's just really kind of everywhere. I love that. I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal journey working with this mushroom. And so I began working with this mushroom out of a need to quit smoking cannabis. And I've heard about this mushroom. I saw it in my parents' backyard when I was 16, and I remember looking at it and being like curious and also like terrified. And there was a lot of respect and reverence, but also like I don't want to mess with that thing. And because like many of you have heard, this is a toxic mushroom that may be hallucinogenic or poisonous. And but I had this one experience at a party where I knew I needed to quit smoking cannabis. I had a negative relationship with it, and it was the first person to ever introduce the idea of microdosing Amanita muscaria. And I was like, why would I do that? It's a poisonous mushroom. And I had already been making mushroom extracts and foraging since like 2016, so I knew about mushrooms and compounds and extractions. And nothing really followed from that night, but then over the next month, 2 other people had said they had worked with this mushroom, and they weren't crazy, they weren't dead. So I was like, okay, well, what happened? And they said, well, nothing really happened during the experience, but it's been like 2 weeks and I still have this lasting sense of peace. And I was like, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. So I started to do research and found that there are medicinal compounds in this mushroom, and whenever you prepare it properly, you can make those more prevalent and make the more toxic ones non-existent or less prevalent. So I began to buy caps from Europe and started making my own preparations. I was microdosing with a tea formulation and just like putting it in little ice cubes and popping little ice cubes every day as a little tea microdose. And then I began to make it as a tincture because I was like, oh, well, I can ship this out to other people and they can get the great benefits that I was receiving, which what I was getting from this was it was helping with my anxiety that I had. It was helping with chronic depression and intrusive thoughts that I had. It was also kind of helping with the fatigue I have from Lyme disease. And so and it was helping me get off of the cannabis for me, which seemed like an impossible task. So that really started to change my personal life because with the cannabis I was, anxious and paranoid and thinking about, how much I was smoking and, just it was like consuming my mind, and it was never enough for me. I had a negative relationship with it, and that's not to, talk about, cannabis is good for a lot of people.
Did I ask you what your dosage was for microdosing?
For the Amanita?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really small in the beginning. It was like what we were taking, like a half a dropper full once every 3 days. And I did that for like 3 weeks or a month or something, and just that small amount. And I would meditate whenever I would take it, like I would connect with the spirit of the mushroom. It wasn't just like taking it and, forgetting about it. So I feel like I got a lot out of it because I came to it with like reverence and respect. And yeah, and I was able to like quit smoking. I started to wean myself off, and then within a month or two, I was like completely done. And for me, it was like a 15-year daily habit, multiple times a day. So it helped me feel at ease, which, the whole reason I was smoking cannabis was I just wanted to feel at ease. But as we know, when we abuse plants, they show that reflection right back. So instead of feeling at ease, I was paranoid and anxious. But Amanita is not habit forming. Anything can be mentally addictive, but it's something I can take or leave, which is really great for me because I have an addictive personality. So I started to make this tincture and ship it out, and I would make a batch and I would sell out, and then I would double it and sell out, and triple it and sell out, and then eventually I was a carpenter and a landscaper at the time, and I had to quit my working with my clients. I was like, well, this is my job now, I guess, and I'm sorry, I can't rake your leaves anymore, and so that was, I don't know, 3 years ago, and that's been my life ever since. So I work with wholesale businesses, sell retail, I do consultations, and I do teaching online and stuff like that, and I'm in the process of developing a Amanita masterclass online too. So I have a lot of gratitude for this mushroom because it's transformed my life in a lot of different ways, and I'm able to support myself and Maria, and we're having a baby in February. And this is how we met. Was actually I was hosting a Amanita ceremony, and she came to that, and so the rest is history.
Amanita brought you together.
Yep. Yep. So yeah. So and feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions throughout the talk, and also we can talk in my booth afterwards. So we're going to talk about the history of mythology, and first we're going to talk about some of the mythology, the kind of questionable history. So anybody familiar with the term soma? Yeah, soma. So soma is a technology or a mushroom or a brew, some type of thing that was used in the Rig Veda. It was this sacred, powerful thing. And there's a lot of theories on what it was, like maybe an alien technology or maybe like a psychedelic brew. There was a archaeologist and author, Gordon Wasson, who postulated that Amanita muscaria was soma. And one of the correlations he drew was that there are 3 filters with this soma that they talk about. And the one filter was sunlight. So whenever you pick an Amanita mushroom, the sunlight is filtering or purifying the ibotenic acid, which I'll talk about the chemistry in a little bit. Ibotenic acid, which can have some negative side effects. It can purify it or filter it into muscimol, which has more of the therapeutic safe benefits. And so sunlight, dehydration. Then the second filter would be actually making a tea brew. So you're boiling the mushrooms in water, and then filtering it through a cheesecloth or a wool. So that would be the second filter. And then the third filter was potentially the human body. So our digestive system has a very low pH, so it's very acidic, and the stomach acid actually does decarboxylate ibotenic acid into muscimol even further. And then you can actually recycle your urine by drinking your urine after you consume Amanita. So that was the one idea, as the third filter for soma. But it's a theory. There's really no way to prove it, but I think it's pretty interesting. I'm very open and skeptical person, and I don't believe that that's what soma was, but I think that there's some possible evidence for that. Another mythological use with Amanita was the berserkers. So anybody familiar with the berserker warriors in Viking culture? So these were a special class of warriors that were they just went on rampages, killing people non-stop onslaughts. And some people would say that they were taking inebriants. So one of the ideas was that it was Amanita muscaria, and that is, it could be potentially true. I've had high dose Amanita experiences where I basically was berserking through the woods, and I could see that being a possibility. But for the most part, when people are taking a high dose decarb tea, it's going to be putting you into this trance where mostly you're going to be laying down, you're going to be falling asleep, but you could get into kind of a psychotic rage in these very, very high doses. If they were consuming Amanita, it might be likely that they were consuming a raw preparation with the ibotenic acid, because the ibotenic acid stimulates glutamate in the body, so it's neuroexcitatory, so it gives you a lot of energy, whereas the muscimol stimulating GABA is more about relaxing restoration. The berserkers could have also been consuming things like datura or henbane, which can also produce multi-day long psychotic rages. So that's another possibility there. And then we have the Celtic tradition. So when you think of Celts, you think of mostly the British Isles and Ireland, but originally they started in middle, central, and southern Europe, near Italy and France, and they were kind of pushed out of that area, the whole area, into the British Isles because of the Roman invaders, basically just wiping them out, anything that was not Roman Catholic. There's a lot of difficulty with kind of finding these threads related to Amanita, and some of the main reasons why is because the Celts didn't have a written language until the last couple hundred years of their reign. Can I give this to you? I don't know if you can. Okay. So the Celts didn't have a written language. They did everything word of mouth, and for most of their existence. And another reason it's hard to tell if they were using Amanita. Oh, it died. Okay. Sorry. So another reason why it's hard to figure out what, if they were working with Amanita, is because they had to be very cryptic. They had to be very cryptic about what they were practicing, because the Romans were very militant about any kind of pagan or shamanic practices. So one theory in the Flag Garrett Compendium, which this is a really excellent book if anybody wants to purchase it. I have it at my booth. It's also available on Amazon, internet. I'm actually going to pass this around if anybody wants to take a gander through that. It's a very dense book, has pretty much everything you could want to learn about it. But there's these symbols within Celtic stories about red speckled salmons. So, there's this one story where it's like, somebody's telling somebody else, you can cook the salmon, but you can't eat it. And then, he's cooking the salmon and he burns his thumb and puts it in the salmon and sucks his thumb because he burned it, and he achieves instantaneous enlightenment. And that doesn't really happen usually whenever you eat fish, so to me that sounds like a symbol for something else, right? And you see this red thing with white spots on it. It's like, okay, I'm seeing the correlation here. So that's one theory to the Celts. Never really know, but I'm of Irish and Scottish descent, and I've worked with other plant medicines, and I feel very connected to Amanita, on an ancestral level. My ancestors were consuming this as a sacrament. Maybe not the distant Christian ones, but maybe more those folklore pagan ancestors. So there is a couple traditions that we know they were working with Amanita, and the first one I'll talk about is the Sami people. So the Sami are they were reindeer herders. So this is about as close to the North Pole as you can get. And this is probably where the Santa Claus tradition comes from. So they had caribou or reindeer, and they had shamans that I believe to this day still do work with Amanita, but it's very limited. And a lot of the younger Sami people talk about it like it's this thing that we used to do and we don't do it anymore. But a shaman would go around and pick Amanita muscarias around this time of the year in the northern hemisphere, and they would be dried, and then even up till the winter solstice, which is 4 days, I believe, before Christmas, right? So they would pick these Amanitas and carry them around in a sack, and these are little red and white gifts that grow under Christmas trees, pine trees, right? And they could also hang them from the pine trees or the Christmas trees to either dehydrate them or to maybe help to spread the spores more. Not really sure, but I'm painting this picture of Santa Claus, right? So then next they have, these houses are snowed in, so they can't go through the front door. They have to climb onto the roof through a smoke hole, which wasn't a chimney, but it was more like a giant hole.
Didn't they also dress like the mushroom, wearing red and white?
I've heard that too, and then I've also heard things that were saying against that's more like a Coca-Cola Christmas thing. But that's the thing, I went down the rabbit hole on Christmas, and it's a mosaic of different cultures. There's really no way to define what Christmas is, but that is also one theory, is that they were dressing like a mushroom with red and white, which we see modern depictions of Santa Claus, red and white. And they would go into these houses and either give people these mushrooms, or they would ask them what do you need help with, and then they would take the mushrooms and go to the spirit world and come back with knowledge as the shaman. So there's a couple theories on that, but you can see how the Santa Claus picture has been painted. They're North Pole reindeer, and the reindeer love to eat them too, by the way. And one method of decarboxylating, whenever you don't have lemons to change the pH, is to drink reindeer urine. So the reindeer eat the mushrooms, and then you collect their urine and drink that. Or maybe they're drinking the shaman's urine. Either way, there's probably some pee drinking going on. We don't really know. But yeah. So would you be able to do your fingerprint? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
You got his fingerprint it.
She's got it, yeah. We're getting there, guys. And another tradition we do know about is the Siberian people of the Kamchatka Peninsula. These are the Kerouac people, and they used Amanita muscaria traditionally too. And a lot of that culture has been wiped out because of Russian colonialism. So the Russians came in and said, hey, like, why don't you try this vodka? It's great, and it's a lot easier than foraging mushrooms. So a lot of them have, you know, switched to alcoholism, unfortunately, and it's a lot easier to get alcohol. So, oh, cool! I don't even have it plugged in anymore. We're good.
Awesome.
So, yeah, so here we have, this is Tatiana. This is, you can go on YouTube and find her, and she is like a Amanita Siberian shaman. There's Santa Claus climbing through the chimney, and there's a modern Sami shaman picture with the reindeer followers. Santa Claus with a mushroom, and this is just a reindeer peeing on a present because why not? So we're going to talk about chemistry. Unless, do you have questions? No. Okay. So we're going to talk about chemistry a little bit. So we have two main compounds we're talking about today: ibotenic acid and muscimol. Ibotenic acid, and they're isoxazole compounds. They're not tryptamines like psilocybin or DMT. Ibotenic acid is a neuroexcitatory compound. Whenever you consume it, it stimulates glutamate in the body, so it has excitatory effects. It can, in very small doses, it can be energizing, speedy, euphoric. In very high doses, it can cause nausea, vomiting, excessive sweating, and very negative experiences. Whenever you consume Amanita, you are decarboxylating it in your gut. So I've eaten raw mushrooms before, and it kind of feels like a roller coaster between like ibotenic acid and muscimol, where you feel like, okay, this is, you know, stimulating, and then, you know, like, okay, now I want to like chill. It's kind of interesting. So there is some concern that it can cause brain lesioning, but it's caused brain lesioning in intracranial injections, so injections into the brain of rats in rat studies. But we don't really have any conclusive evidence on oral consumption with humans. So, you know, that's a different story. And then we have muscimol. So ibotenic acid decarboxylates into muscimol. So it loses a carboxyl group through a couple of different processes. So if you change the pH of the mushroom, if you apply heat, or you do a combination of the two, or if you ferment it, that can also, like using lactobacillus, can also decarboxylate the ibotenic acid into muscimol. Muscimol is a GABA agonist, so it's going to have therapeutic relaxing effects. Other compounds or other substances that contain GABA agonist compounds are alcohol, benzodiazepines, lavender, chamomile, kava kava. So those are kind of the genre of effects that you might, you know, associate muscimol with. And this is incredibly medicinal compound. It helps people that have anxiety, insomnia, depression, PTSD, substance abuse. I've helped people get off of all sorts of different pharmaceutical drugs, mostly benzodiazepines because it's activating the same brain pathways, but also SSRIs, opiates, cannabis, and nicotine as well. Any questions? How's everybody feeling? Good?
Great.
Cool. So we're going to demystify some of the toxicity. So there's a couple things that people think about whenever they see Amanita. They think, oh, that's going to destroy your liver. That's hepatotoxic. But the reality is that it's not hepatotoxic. It doesn't affect the liver in a negative way. Some things that are hepatotoxic are the death caps or destroying angels. Those will I think it's they stop protein synthesis and they will just literally melt your liver and you'll be dead in like 4 days. Those are the Amanita phalloides, Amanita bisporgyria. These look nothing like Amanita. They're not in this section. Amanita, they're the same species, but Amanita species is very broad. Another concern is that Amanita muscaria contains amatoxins. Those are the toxins that are within the death caps. Those aren't present in muscarias or section Amanita. And they do not contain mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are found in molds, black mold. And then, I talked about the brain lesioning with ibotenic acid. It's not conclusive, so it's best. I think it's best for beginners to start with a fully decarboxylated tincture, like what I was passing around. Just in my last year or two, I've been curious about like nibbling the raw mushrooms. And I've taken like a large amount of the raw mushrooms. I have a YouTube video where I like documented my experience. It's pretty funny. If you guys want to watch it. I had to do it for science. I was like very curious, so I took one mushroom and I split it in half and weighed both cap halves. And it was important that I did this because each mushroom can vary in potency. So I could pick one and then I could pick another one and they could be tenfold more or less potent. So whenever I do my tinctures, I do like a large batch, so it's more of a homogeneous average. So I took this one mushroom, I divided it in half. I ate the one half raw, and I took the other half and I dehydrated it, and I did a full decarb tea, and I documented both experiences and was like, this is the same mushroom, and it has this wide of a range of effects. And that also lends to that curiosity of it. It's like, how could one mushroom be so different based on preparation? Whereas with psilocybin, it's like you eat raw versus dry, and there's not much of a difference. But with Amanita, there's a major difference. So that was a fun little experiment.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
For dehydrating it, is that is it a yield issue why you would do that, or is it a requirement? Because it seems like just the heating would work on its own.
A little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. So I'll talk about dehydration in a little bit, but yeah, it's I did one time I took a bunch of raw mushrooms and boiled them just with no pH change, and they were totally raw. And I boiled them for like 45 minutes and drank them, and it was ibotenic acid. It's not just, but you can also do a long boil, like a 12-hour simmer at a neutral pH, and that seems to also do a full decarb. But the Austin patent is a decarboxylation method I'll talk about. But yeah, good question. Any other questions? So how many people live in the Northeast U.S.? Most of us, or how? A lot of people local here.
Midwest.
This is Midwest, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's really many Gisawi out here, right?
Oh, they're all over the place out here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk mostly about the yellow flag Eric, which was the tincture that we had. Amanita muscaria variation Gisawii, also known as Amanita chrysophlemma. It's going under taxonomy change. This mushroom can be found anywhere from like Michigan to Quebec down to North Carolina and everywhere in between, and even outside of that region. We have local pantheroids too. This is not an exhaustive list, but the ones I know about are the Amanita velatipes and Amanita multisquamosa. These ones are going to be, they contain muscimol and ibotenic acid, but they have a very large amount compared to the yellow flag agaric or the red European variety. And we have a picture here of multisquamosa. They have like a longer stem, wider cap, and then here's the velatipes. They're definitely not like a beginner identification. I would say stick with the yellow flag Erics, they're a lot easier to identify, but even those have lookalikes, which I'll talk about. Would be Amanita Formosa, variation Formosa, and then Amanita flammable. Those grow in the west coast over here, and then in the northeast, in this region, we have the yellow flag Eric, and then in the south east, we have Amanita persicina, the southern peach Amanita. These all contain psychoactive compounds there. And then we have, up in Alaska and like going over to Siberia, we have Amanita muscaria, like real, European variety. And they also grow in New Zealand, Australia, all throughout Europe. There are varieties that grow down into Mexico too. I think those are the flammable, I believe, and in South America. Yeah, there's a lot of different types, and then there's even the most potent, I believe, is in Japan. It's called Amanita abutenigaki, and that one is like super potent. There's a pantheroid that grows in Washington and Oregon called Amanita pantheranoides, and that one is really, really strong. I personally tried that, and I wouldn't recommend it. It was like the trip of a lifetime, basically. It was not a good time. But I'm glad I did it. But I wouldn't recommend it. So I'm assuming some of you may want to forage these, or at least know about identifying them and picking. So this season is typically September through November, but they can even show up as early as like June or July, depending on how cool and how wet it is. And I've also picked them in December with snow on them. So it just depends on the year. They are mycorrhizal with white pine, spruce, and then also some hardwood trees. And the lookalikes are Flavoconia, Amanita flavoconia, so Amanita flavoconia is kind of more yellow, stalked, it's really short, very small cap. Amanita frostiana kind of looks like Gassawii, and it may taxonomically be the same, but it's kind of hard to tell. Amanita flavoconia is not poisonous. It is actually edible too. Frostiana, I do believe, contains muscimol. Are you familiar, Eric?
I'm not.
Okay. Amanita praecox, that one has kind of a creamy brown cap. It's smooth. It usually doesn't have warts on it. They usually wash off, or they're kind of like sticking on top, like little tufts. And then you have Amanita parcellata, which is really funny. It's always funny in ID groups. Like people are like, "Oh, I found a red muscaria in America," and it has little tiny white dots on it, and it has like kind of a shaggy yellowish stem. That one's also edible, non-psychoactive. And then we have Amanita flavorubens. So that's a blusher mushroom, but this one, flavorubens, is like kind of a yellow color. And you can tell very easily if something's a blusher in the rubescens family or the Amararubescens family, based on if it's been nibbled, or like if a twig fell on it and hurt it, it would like turn pink, it blushes. And interesting little factoid about that, is anybody familiar with niacin? The vegan supplement. It helps your blood stimulate and flush, and you can flush out your pee if you need to have a clean piss test. The water-soluble form of niacinamide, is actually found in these blusher mushrooms. So that might be what is giving it that blushing. So there's not a lot of lookalikes, and most of them are edible or psychoactive. So the main way to identify Gassawii is there's like usually it has a basal stem, kind of like a round base at the bottom, and then it has 3 concentric rings. Usually, as it grows and matures, those rings can kind of stretch out and become like faded bands. They can have a yellow cap, an orange cap, a yellow to orange, even a little bit of red or pink in the middle. And then sometimes they can be almost completely white. And then we do have Amanita chrysoblema, which, true chrysoblema is completely white. And there's like a lot of arguments on taxonomy, if it's, a phenotype or if it's actually like.
Have they done any DNA on them yet?
I haven't seen any DNA. So until they actually show DNA proof, I'm just calling it the Gissalia. I do like the whole name. Like this, AKA, yeah, so.
So you're saying that the Amanita that is red that we find around here is not the muscaria?
Well,
Is that Parsival-Vata?
well, it depends on other characteristics. So Gissalia can have some red in it, but Parsival-Vata is like red.
Yeah.
Like it's
So
like.
I do have some on my property, and I thought I identified it as muscaria, but no, it's
Yeah.
hardwood forest, so.
Well, they can grow in hardwood. It's less common in America, I've seen.
Yeah.
Like I've seen like a couple around hardwoods, but mostly I see them around eastern white pines and native spruces. But if you take a picture and send it to me or like the Amanita International Facebook group, somebody will identify it in like 10 seconds.
Right,
Yeah.
so you mean you could like inoculate hardwood with it? Just
There,
goes around?
in theory you could, but in practice it hasn't really been proven. Because you could do like spore slurries and but it would probably take like 10 years unless you were really doing it a lot. And I don't really know. I mean, there's like Mark Niemöller talked about how he did that, but
I planted a bunch of white pines on the back of our property, and at the time we were planting them, I was picking Amanita muscaria, and so I was just taking the stems and the bases and I took all of them and buried them in the roots of the white pines. I don't know if it'll work or not.
yeah. Report back to us in 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, who knows? But it would take a long time to develop that, And I actually I've gotten permission from like Christmas tree farms because during like Amanita season, I'm like, yo, go to a Christmas tree farm, right? And I found like 0. So like.
They change them out too fast.
Yeah.
But they even had old ones where they were like 30 feet tall, and I found one in like a 100-acre property. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I figured they would be there, but so just an overview of the main muscaroids that we're working with here is Amanita muscaria is the red and white cap one. It's the most common around the world. And then we have the Amanita pantherina, which only grows in Europe. It's 3 to 5 times stronger in muscimol in potency. It has a brown cap. Amanita regalis is slightly more potent than muscaria, and that has kind of like a reddish tan color to it. And then Amanita persicina, the southern peach, grows in like Georgia, Carolinas, and Florida. And then Amanita muscaria, variation Gissalia, aka Amanita chrysoblema, the yellow flag Eric, which we were talking about, which is local to this area. And then we have Amanita muscaria subspecies flavolvulata on the west coast, so California, Oregon, Washington, even parts of the Midwest too, up into British Columbia. And then we have Amanita pantherinoides, which is a very, very strong pantheroid from the west coast, which I would not recommend. And many, many, many more.
Which one do you use in your tinctures?
So the ones that I use are the Amanita muscaria from Europe,
Okay,
the yellow flag Eric, and then I also use the pantherina.
okay.
And I do use the regalis as well, but I use that in oil infusions. Yeah. But they could all be used in a tincture.
And you keep them all separate by species when you do the tinctures,
Yeah.
I assume.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I thought about doing like a triple blend. I was like, there's no need for that. Yeah. But yeah.
Question
So
back there.
Just one quick
Yeah.
question. Any complications with shipping in the Amanita?
shipping, yeah. So international shipping, I can have some issues, but I know my way around customs. So and labels. So I ship everywhere in the world, but it's a Schedule 9 drug in Australia, so it's illegal. It grows there, ironically. So you can go out and pick it, and then you're, possessing an illegal substance. Same with, local psilocybe varieties here.
Right.
It's also illegal in a couple other countries. I forget what they are. I think it's like Romania and Thailand or something. And then in Alabama, no, it's Louisiana. Louisiana?
Yeah.
Yeah, Louisiana, it's, you're not allowed to consume it, but you can have it as an ornamental. It was like a dumb law back in, you can't have Mimosa hostilis, but you can grow it. It has to be like ornamental. But there's no, it's unscheduled, it's unregulated.
Just like cactuses.
Yeah, exactly.
Indigenous cactuses are illegal and
Right.
they're decorative.
Right, exactly. But I can tell you, I bought a San Pedro cactus in Home Depot and tripped balls on that. So I was like, thank you, Home Depot. It was really funny. It was like in the middle of the aisle, like get me out of here, dude. And I was like, all right, you're coming with me. So, so we're going to talk about dehydration a little bit. This chart is available online. There's tons of studies on this Facebook group I help admin called Amanita, Muscaria, Science and Magic. We have tons of studies, a beginner's guide, lots of charts, and so my ideal sweet spot for dehydration is like 122 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't like doing it too hot because you get an overall potency loss, and but you're left with more ibotenic acid in that. But then if you do a further decarb through boiling it, and you're making sure that you do a full decarb, I think it's better to dry them as low as possible. If your goal is to have something potent, and you can have it potent with ibotenic acid or muscimol or a combination, but dehydration is just a preservation step in a lot of ways. You could dehydrate them at a really high temperature and oxidize a lot of it and lose a lot of the overall potency, which I don't recommend doing because then you're just getting something very weak. But the important thing is knowledge and knowing what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Obviously, I know how it would work in a food dehydrator, but for sun dehydrator, is it literally just like putting it out on a deck, or do you have to enclose it in something? Or
Yeah, the sun, I don't recommend sun dehydration. The sun is good for dehydration to a point, and then, the sun destroys everything. It's amazing, and there's some theories that gives them vitamin D, but I don't think that's even true. Amanita muscaria naturally has a ton of vitamin D in it. It's actually one of the most nutritious, vitamins filled mushrooms. Were you gonna say something? Oh, okay. But yeah, I think the sun is it's good. Maybe under shade cloth, so you get the warmth, but it's not getting destroyed. But the sun just destroys everything. It gives life and it destroys. So.
And it won't get as dry as the dehydrator.
Right. It'll be uneven, and then the thicker parts will be still wet, and then also too, it'll take longer. And if there's any maggots in the cap or the stem, they'll just keep eating it. The dehydrator is the way to go.
What unit is used to measure the potency?
What milligrams and volume? What unit?
Yeah.
Yeah, grams, milligrams.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I meant more so, okay, let me change my question. What's the average dosage you recommend?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, that would depend on a lot of things. We're going to talk about the microdosing and stuff in a sec, actually. Yeah, but it would depend on what your goal is and how they're prepared and how old they are. But I like to start people off with 100 milligrams or less, maybe 250 milligrams, something like that. A full dropper full of that weaker tincture we took is 60 milligrams. So, just low. But people can take a lot more and not have a full-blown psychoactive experience, but I'll talk about that. So. questions about dehydration?
Well,
Yeah.
I have a question about what we were just talking about. When you were mentioning that you had like the trip of it, your lifetime or whatever, what is the difference between that and like just like psilocybin when it comes to like your like I guess your trip?
Yeah, I'll talk about that too. I have a whole slide about the psilocybin. Is that what you're asking?
Well, when you were saying that you had a trip of your lifetime,
Yeah.
that wasn't psilocybin you were talking about.
Correct.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
It
like,
was.
What is the difference? Like, is it the same type of trip or is it just?
No, it's totally different. It's like, so with Amanita, it's being a GABA agonist. It's like a delirium dissociative, and it can get into these like kind of really like spirally dream-like realms where you don't really know if you're like awake or dreaming, or it can be like disorienting.
Okay.
Which psilocybin can be like that.
Is it kind of like daydreaming really heavily almost?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but I'll talk about like what the hero doses are like. Yeah. Any more questions? How are we all doing?
Good,
Good?
great.
Nice. How are we doing on time?
It's 12:09, that's why it's 12:09.
Okay, sweet. All right. All right, so how do you, all right, so you found them, you dehydrated them, how do you prepare them? Well, you can eat them raw, which I don't recommend. You could powderize it and consume it like that. That's a better way to do it, but you will be also getting some ibotenic acid. So a lot of people when they microdose, they'll just grind up like an ounce or 2 ounces or more into powder, and they'll put them in capsules, and they'll just take it like that. A little bit of ibotenic acid in that, well, it's not going to really do anything. It's more in like the larger doses. Ibotenic acid can be really difficult. So another way to do it is to make a tea, which you can do a full decarb. One method to do a full decarb is known as the Austin patent, or the Trent Austin study. He did a study where he took Amanita mushrooms and he lowered the pH, which you could do with citric acid, which is my recommendation, or ascorbic acid. You could do it with straight lemon juice, but it would probably taste really bad. You would boil them at a pH of 3. So you want to check the pH, with the mushrooms in it, little pH strips or a pH reader. And then you want to boil it at 100 degrees Celsius, which is basically a simmer. It's like the boiling temperature of water at atmospheric pressure. And you do that for 90 to 120 minutes. Or you can do a partial decarb, which I prefer whenever I make a tea. I just boil them for like 30 minutes. You only need to boil it for 15 minutes to get all the compounds out. And then, but what I do is 30 minutes, splashes some lemon juice, and that's good for me. But everybody's, got their own preference. You can also smoke the mushrooms dried, so you can like actually take the caps and grind them up, mix them up with tobacco or cannabis or other herbs and smoke them.
Have you done that?
Yeah, I've done it a lot, actually. I like it. It's pretty mild. It's not the best way to utilize it because a lot of it gets torched up, But it is kind of interesting. It's just like a very mild, sedative kind of effect. One time I did the guided journey for my speech this year. I like lit 2 Amanita joints and like passed them around for people. So that was fun. So you can also vape, so you can like vaporize. I've made like an Amanita resin extract, and then you can like vaporize that or like smoke it out of a bong or something. You can make a tincture, water or alcohol extract. Alcohol isn't as effective as a solvent as water is, or methanol. I don't use methanol. But you can also do an oil infusion over time, or a simmer on the stove for a couple hours. And you could also make like a fermented yogurt. That's one possible way to partially decarboxylate Amanita. So taking them and putting them in raw milk and fermenting it and making kind of a decarbed yogurt. That's another idea that maybe what Soma was. And yeah, you can also make salves out of them. So you can take that oil infusion and combine it with beeswax or something to make it more thick. Any questions on all that? All right.
Question.
Yeah.
So I've heard yogurt or other dairy products help with the potency of psilocybin trips. Is there anything on that and the Amanita muscaria?
I'm not sure. No, I haven't heard that. No. Yeah, I mean, I know that like lemon can dephosphorylate psilocybin and psilocin to make it more bioavailable, but no, I'm not familiar with that. Yep. So we're going to talk about dosage and experience. So we're going to talk about microdosing. So we're talking about the 50, 100, 250 milligrams average range. Some people would say a microdose isn't like, you don't even have a microdose till you're like at 1 gram or 2 or 3. It's the same thing with everything. People say like, I microdose psilocybin, I take 1 gram, and I'm like, that's not a micro, bro. You're tripping. like a micro, I don't feel it yet. Well, that's the point. A microdose is a sub-threshold experience. If you want a mini dose, that's where you get into like, I feel a little buzz. Some things that you can experience with microdosing is just the relief from anxiety, feeling a sense of openness, feeling more creative, feeling more at ease, less anxious, less depressed, less intrusive thoughts, more focused, calm. The threshold dose is kind of a sweet spot for, I don't really want to have like a full-on experience, but I want to feel like a little something more. And the microdose is 50 milligrams to 3 grams on average. Threshold dose is about 2 grams to 15 grams. So that's a huge, spread. And it's not like psilocybin where it's like, oh, I'll take 2 or 15. It's about the same. I've had experiences with like 15 grams where not much happened. And I've had other experiences where I was in this like trance-like state in my bathtub, like all peaceful, and it felt like, oh, it's like, 30 minutes passed, and it was like 3 hours, and I'm just like, whoa, like, where did the time go? Time dilation, right? So time distortion.
Did you get cold?
Oh yeah, that's what kind of brought me out of the trance. Was like, oh, the bath water is cold now. So I should probably get out of here before I fall asleep. So yeah, and that's a really nice place to be lucid and still present and but still in that space. This is a good place to work through trauma. So. The cool thing about working with Amanita and trauma work is that PTSD is this reoccurring stimulus response cycle. And so let's say something happened to you when you were younger and a memory is triggered by a stimulus in the present moment that reminds you of that experience. And then the body says, oh no, that's a negative experience. And the fight or flight response is activated. So with Amanita muscaria being a GABA agonist, it actually is suppressing that fight or flight response, which, it's important to have this. This is how we survived as people for millions of years. But in this modern day and age, it's oftentimes overactivated. Our stress response is overactivated. So whenever we have this stimulus response cycle actually paused for a moment, you're actually not participating in that feedback loop anymore. And whenever you do this, you can actually have a new response to that memory, and it's actually helped you get to a place where you're not that traumatized person anymore because you're rewriting the script. So that's a really nice place to work at with the threshold dose. And this is something that you would want to have you know, it's me time. I'm gonna, you know, end my day. I'm gonna spend the next, you know, 4 hours or so before I go to bed to enjoy this experience. I'm not driving vehicles. I'm not operating machinery. I'm not at work. I'm chilling. Microdoses, you can pretty much just do everything, go about your day as normal. So then we have the heroic doses, which is usually starting around 15 grams, 20, 30, or 60 grams plus. And this is where you get into Alice in Wonderland. All right, this is where you go down the rabbit hole, and you are there for like 12 hours.
Just a quick one, is that raw or dry?
Dry.
Oh,
Dry. Dry, yeah. Raw, it would be like, you know, it's like 10% of the weight.
Right,
You know?
no, that's why I was asking, because I
Yeah.
heard you say 60, I'm like, hold on.
Oh, I know, like, I've never done that much, but I know people like will take like giant blender fulls and they're just like mixing it with water and like chugging it and like, but I, you know, with those pantherinoides that I was talking about where I had like the most intense trip of my life, it was 2 grams. 2 grams. I blended, you know, 6 grams for 3 people, and we split it, and I was berserking through the forest for like 12 hours. So whenever people, I had somebody say, hey, this guy wants to try Amanita, I gave him some pantherinoids. I was like, no. I was like, take them back. Like, that is irresponsible. Muscaria is way more gentle, way more, like, there's way more room. You know, I mean, you could take 2 grams or 7 grams, and it's like not going to overwhelm you. It's like you have to really choke down 15, 30, 60 grams.
Does your body build up a tolerance to it, and then you have to take higher milligram dosage to get effect?
Yeah. It's there's like a couple theories that there might be like a reverse tolerance effect, but in general, it's good to pause so you don't build up that tolerance. Yeah.
Or just taking like every 2-3 days, not every day.
Yeah. I mean, I like to take it like some days, some weeks like 5 days on, 2 days off,
Okay.
or every other day. Whenever I was first starting off, it was every 3 days.
Okay.
Yep. So with the heroic doses, that's when you can get into a state of mind where you may think you're dreaming, but you're actually awake, or vice versa. You can have amnesia, you can black out, you can fall over, you can hurt yourself. It's really important that if you are going to do this, that you're working with somebody else who's there, who's sober, who's present. And not just somebody who's a trip sitter, but somebody who knows Amanita specifically, because it's a way different experience than psilocybin. And yeah, go ahead.
How long are those effects?
It can be like 12 to 14 hours. Yeah, I mean, whenever I had my experience, it was like I was running through the forest for 12 hours all night, like through the darkness. And, you know, I had like one moment where I'm like running down this like road, and it's like, you know, I don't have my shoes on, my glasses, and then like it's like a blink, and it's like light out, and I'm on a different road, and I don't even know where I am. And so I could have died a lot of different ways, and luckily I was able to like echolocate my way back home to like our campsite, because we had a neighbor who was like shooting guns. So I was like, oh, I'll just follow the gunshot. You know? And I made my way back, but I didn't even sleep until like 3 a.m. the next day. Because I was like riding this like, you know, and that took me like, you know, 4 days to like process to get back to normal, and then like another year to fully integrate all of that experience. So, you know, it's not really for the faint of heart. And I have a lot of people that will message me and say, hey, I want to like trip on Amanita, like how much? And I'm like, do not do that. If you want to have like a trip, I would start with something like psilocybin or maybe acid, you know, LSD. But this is like some deep, you know, intense shamanic work. I know a lot of people who have tried a lot of different psychedelics, myself included, very high doses, and they say that the high dose Amanita is like the most intense. It's physiologically affecting you. You know, your heart rate can change. You can be sweating. You can have like picture framing, so it's not like normal reality where like you just see everything fluidly. It's like 1 minute it's like click, 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 click like that, and then also too everything's spiraling and spinning. So it can be a very, very intense, challenging experience. So I always recommend the microdose because we can get into the healing benefits and still live our life and experiences. Also too, microdoses are more accessible for people who have mental disorders. So if you have schizophrenia or psychosis or paranoia or anything like that, you can get these benefits. Also, people have limited time. They have to work every day or they have children. You can microdose and still have benefits. So, any questions on the dosage? Yeah.
So, is muscimol a muscarinic agonist? Like the salivating and kind of like sweating?
So there is also muscarine in Amanita species, but it is in very small amounts compared to something like the jack-o'-lantern mushrooms.
Gotcha.
Ibotenic acid, I believe, has probably more muscarinic-like effects.
Yeah.
Muscimol might too, because I've had a little bit of both.
But it doesn't like go up with the heroic doses.
Well, if you're doing a heroic dose, you might get into more of those like, oh, this is actually not a safe level of muscarine or not an ideal. Yeah, so that could also be playing a role. And it would also depend on like, each mushroom might change in muscarinic content too. But the jack-o'-lantern mushrooms, those are like really high.
Yeah.
And people might mistake those for a chanterelle or chicken of the woods, and then they're like,
Yeah.
they're just like salivating. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Any other questions about dosage? Yeah.
Are higher doses recommended in the case of treating mental ailments?
No, I would not. I would say no, unless it was something that you were working with, like on a threshold base for a long time, and with like a shaman or somebody that is like with you. These higher doses can cause psychosis. They can induce psychotic rages. It's not something that somebody who is already on a fringe kind of mental state would want to take. Because I've seen people go into like manic rages, myself included, and I have to like come back from it and de-escalate myself. But with the microdoses, that's way more accessible, and I think like those threshold doses would be a little bit more safe, for that kind of individual. But again, I would be working with somebody who's like an integration coach and like checking in with you, and it wouldn't just be doing it on their own. Yeah. All right, we're going to talk about psilocybin and Amanita. So this is a fun kind of topic that I didn't cover last year, but I've been working with a company that provides microdosing of psilocybin, and they added on my products. So I've had to compare psilocybin a lot with Amanita. So a lot of people might want to microdose in general, and they don't really know anything about it, and they're just like, okay, microdose magic mushrooms, psilocybin. Some people might experience a lot of anxiety with that, and there's two schools of thought. It's like, okay, this is something that is coming up in you, and you need to work through it. And other people, they have bullshit out there. There's like these Amanita gummies. You find them in smoke shops, and you've probably heard about diamond shrooms is getting blown up right now because most of these gummies are manufactured by like a few producers, and then they're distributed and they're white labeled, and they all have they're sharing COAs and lab reports. One of these companies I used to supply, and then I realized that they were shady and they were stealing my lab reports and then giving permission to their distributors, and the labs had to do cease and desist letters, and we even privately tested some of their products and found out they were putting synthetic psilocybin in them. There was user reports of synthetic cannabinoids found in these gummies, and it's come out that the FDA is now testing them. They're investigating every Amanita gummy, psychedelic mushroom gummy that has nutritional data facts, because Amanita muscaria is not allowed to be sold for human consumption. And so they've found metrogenine from kratom. They've found kava-lactones from kava, and they've also found 4-ACO-DMT, which is synthetic psilocybin. This has all been found in these gummies. Some of them contain muscimol, some of them contain ibotenic acid, some of them don't have either of those. And the problem is that Amanita muscaria is so new to this culture that nobody really knows what the effect is going to be. So they just take this gummy and they go, oh yeah, I like see these like visuals and everything's wiggling. And I'm like, that's not Amanita. Like, you don't see visuals with Amanita till it's too late. Till you're like in it. And so, you know, you want to avoid anything that looks like shit, it's going to be shit. Don't buy any food or drugs in a gas station. If you buy your gas there, don't buy food there. Don't buy medicine there. And if it's found in a smoke shop, it's probably also bullshit. You know, a lot of these products are all the same. They just have different labels on them. So, you know, really the only way to know is to have a vetted source. So, you know, a major issue with this too is that they may ruin all of this for all of us, right? So, the DEA is there in place. The FDA is there for a purpose. If we can't regulate ourselves, they regulate it for us. And I don't want that, you don't want that. We should be able to regulate ourselves. And the biggest you know, rule of thumb with all of this is like harm reduction. You know, do no harm. It's the first Hippocratic oath. So yeah, a lot of people have been hospitalized. There's been a couple associated deaths. These are all from these gummies. And recall notices. This was some test results that I did personally with a company called Silomart. They tested positive for psilocybin, no ibotenic acid, no muscimol. So where do you buy Amanita products? Well, I sell Amanita products, but if you don't want to buy them from me, we also have a trusted vendors list on our Amanita muscaria Science and Magic Facebook page. You can find that in the little file tabs or the pinned posts. We have a ton of really good resources. We have the Fly-Haired Compendium author, Kevin Feeney, is in our group. He'll chime in every once in a while. That book is really good. If you want to buy a nice thick book, I love to have that just at my bedside. There's a Reddit group, Amanita muscaria, just called Reddit/Amanita muscaria. And yeah, join the Facebook group. It's really informative. We have like almost 100,000 members in it. It's the biggest and best internet resource I've found, and I loved it so much I became an admin and helped to manage it. And I will also be working in the process of making my own kind of premium membership service, Amanita masterclass. So we'll have video chapters and monthly integration groups on Zoom, and then discounted products. So that's something that you can look forward to. And yeah, I actually made it the whole way through my speech without having any time constraints, because where are we at now? Is it
12:38.
perfect? All right. So yeah, just
Put it on the table.
I just want, what's up?
Never bring those over.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I just want to thank you all for being so attentive and patient, like writing notes. Like this is the kind of group I love talking with, because I can tell that you guys are all just soaking it all in. And, you know, I feel like because this mushroom has helped me personally change my life, and, you know, I have like a great reverence and respect for it. And so part of my mission right now in life is to really get the good information out there, get the good resources out there. So I think that Amanita has come back into popularity, even though this mushroom has been used for thousands of years. In a time right now where we have so much trauma and so much emotional disconnection. I think Amanita can help us sink into ourselves a little bit more and not be so much in the pain body of it all. So that's, I think, really why Amanita has become more popular and came, making a resurgence and a revival. So thank you all for coming, and if anybody has any questions, I'll be here and at my booth. And thank you guys.
Thank you.